family mode.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGeek webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of the various domains. The topic of today's session is From Geek to Manager, 5 tips to help techies transition into management. This webinar is brought to you by Citrix GoToAssist and powered by Citrix GoToWebinar. I am Mohini from TechGig and I'll be your moderator today. Now, there's still a few more people to join us today, so while they settle in and take their seats in the back rows, I'll quickly run through some housekeeping with you. There are 2 ways you can interact with us today. The first method is by using your questions pane to type in your questions for our guest speaker and provide your comments from time to time. We'll have a full Q&A session with today's speaker at the end of the webinar, but we'll also try and cover off some of your burning questions as we go along. So feel free to type them in as you think of them. If you want to just try out the questions pane now, perhaps by letting us know where you are watching today's webinar from. The second method is if you are on Twitter and want to reach out to some of today's other webinar delegates, we'll be using the hashtag #LeadGeeks. So please feel free to join the conversation there during and after today's webinar. And if anyone is listening through their headphones or speakers, if you do have any issues with your audio, do note the audio mode panel on the control panel highlighted above in the red. Simply select the radio button for telephone and the toll-free number for your country, access code and PIN will appear on your screen for you to dial. Now, I am very pleased to welcome today's guest, Paul Glen, to the virtual stage. Mr. Paul Glen, CEO of Leading Geeks, a Computerworld columnist and author of the award-winning book Leading Geeks, How to Manage People and Lead People Who Deliver Technology. Mr. Paul Glen is the CEO of Leading Geeks, an education and consulting firm devoted to improving collaboration between technical and non-technical groups and people. He has 20 plus years experience delivering and managing IT-related products and services. For 4 years, he was Western Regional Manager for SEI Information Technology, a national IT consultancy. In that role, he had full profit and loss responsibility for a $13 million consulting practice including supervision of sales, service delivery, recruiting, human resource management, and administration. Prior to serving as the Western Regional Manager, he served as the Regional Manager for SEI's Oak Brook region in the Chicago area. He has won prestigious awards such as the 2007 ASBPE Silver Award for Regular Contribution column in a nationally distributed publication, 2003 Financial Times Germany Book Award for Best Leadership Book. Mr. Glen is an MBA from the J.L. Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern University with majors in marketing, organizational behavior, and strategy. He received a BA from Cornell University with majors in computer science and mathematics. So over the next hour, with the help of our international guest presenter, we'll be aiming to share, decide if you would like to be a manager, explore what it's really like to be a manager, navigate the common challenges in becoming one. Plus, of course, we'll be trying to answer all your burning questions. So without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker, Mr. Paul. Over to you, Mr. Glen.
Thanks, Mohini. Well, I'm really excited to be here today because this is an opportunity to share sort of some of my experience and let you know some of the things that I've experienced over the years. Because, as you just heard in my background, I'm a technical person, like probably most of you are. My undergraduate degree is in computer science, and I started my career programming. And at the age of 26, I was suddenly asked to manage a group of 50 people. And it was quite an interesting experience. I hadn't really asked for the job. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a manager. I really loved, having my hands-on role in technology. And I don't know why they asked me to do it. It wasn't something I had sought. But it was a fascinating experience of the transition. And since I've made that transition, which has been a very long time now, I've also had the opportunity to work with a lot of other people who are in the process of either making that transition or deciding whether to make that transition. And so it's a wonderful time, but it's also something that's really important for you to spend a little bit of energy thinking about before you just assume that being a manager is the natural next step to being someone who's technical. Because when we start out as geeks, we don't necessarily move immediately in management, nor necessarily should we. So before we go too far into this, let's talk about what are we talking about. When I use the word geek, obviously I'm an American. It does not have, here in the U.S., it doesn't have a particularly negative connotation. We're just talking about loosely anyone who chooses to work in technology or engineering. And so these are people who choose to work in a field that's highly analytical. And originally it was an insult, but it is no more. And manager is someone who's designated by an organization to marshal people and resources to accomplish desired goals. So we're not necessarily talking about executive roles. We're talking about someone who's been designated officially. So there's plenty of people who do managerial work who don't have a managerial title. And they still are a manager because they've been designated by the organization as someone responsible. So before we get too far into this, let's pull up a poll and find out, who's in our audience, who's out there today, and what's your background. So if you take just a moment, give us some idea of who we're talking to today, and that way we can make sure we're giving you the best information possible. And Mohini, if you can read the results, I actually don't see the results on the screen.
We still have people selecting their...
Are you out there, Mohini?
Yeah, we have around 46% people saying a geek contemplating becoming a manager. 23% of the people are saying a geek who recently became a manager. 12% are long-term managers of a technical team. 5%, somewhere around 5% for someone who helps managers transition, and around 12% have opted for the option other.
Ah, there are results. Wonderful. So we've got about half of us are folks who are thinking about it. 24% are recently recently became a manager and are in that transition. So hopefully you'll find some interesting tips here for you. So that's great. Thank you. All right. If I can get control back, there we go. And on we go. So the first thing is, what are we going to talk about today? So first, we've really got 4 things to talk about. Reasons you want to be a manager, the common myths about being a manager that people understand before they make that transition. A few things that no one will ever tell you before you make that transition. And even though the title says 5, I decided to throw in 10. So you get a bonus. There's actually 10 things you can do to really make this work for you. So the first question, and the most important question for half of you out there, is do you really want to be a manager?